On September the 8th, 2021, WWE tweeted out an official statement on Triple H. It says, Paul Levesque, aka Triple H, underwent a successful procedure last week at Yale New Haven Hospital following a cardiac event. The episode was caused by a genetic heart issue, and Paul is expected to make a full recovery. This was in September of 2021. Now, here it is in March of 2022, and Triple H has formally announced his retirement. After several months of restructuring, he had numerous people working with him were released from the company. There was a lot of internet banter about the dismantling and reconstruction of NXT and how he was losing his position. He was being pushed out the door. But in reality, the guy just had not fully come back and cannot continue under the same circumstances that he was under before. So Triple H went to ESPN, and I'm not going to play the audio or try to get into too much detail. I'm just going to read the write-up as it came from PW Insider. This is from Mike Johnson. It says, Levesque noted he had a bout of viral pneumonia that got worse and worse, and he had been coughing up blood. His wife noticed and had him getting checked out, and they found fluid in his lungs and around his heart during testing. He noted the EKG and electrocardiogram showed that his injection fraction, a measurement of the percentage of blood leaving your heart each time it squeezes, was at 30, when it should have been around 50 to 60. He was told to pack a bag and go to the emergency room. By the time he arrived there, the fraction was down to 20, and he was in a heart failure. By the next morning, he was down to 12, and he was going to get a heart cauterization. He said he was on the 1 yard line. You don't want to be in. He said 99% gone. And he has his 3 young girls, 15, 13, 11, and that got really real. He came home a little sick, and suddenly their dad, who's this big tough guy, he's in the hospital. There are moments where he was getting put under and wondered if this was it and whether he would wake up. That was tough to swallow, and it makes you think differently about life. It doesn't make you any less driven. It just makes you appreciate life, your friends, and family more. Levesque almost broke down discussing this. He was asked what the future holds for him. As far as being an in-ring performer, he said he's done and will never wrestle again. He now has a defibrillator in his chest, and it's, quote, probably not a good idea to get zapped on live TV. Levesque's final match would have been against Shinsuke Nakamura and Triple H, teaming up to beat Robert Roode and Samoa Joe in Tokyo, Japan in June 2019. So that is the deal. Triple H in-ring days are done, and with his heart issues and in the condition that he's in, likely he's going to be working a much lighter schedule than before, which probably explains all of the releases and why NXT had to be revamped, because he would likely no longer be running that promotion either. It's not just a matter of is he going to be okay. I mean, we don't know for sure. Only he knows for sure. I trust that he will be. The issue here is that he's going to have to limit the amount of stress that he has, which of course means he can't rip and run behind young guys anymore and negotiate contracts and do all this other stuff. So yeah, he's going to definitely have to scale back what he does. That explains pretty much everything. Why Triple H has been pushed sort of to the side is because they really don't have much of a choice. Now, as an executive of a American corporation, he's an executive. They cannot lie about this kind of stuff. They can't lie about his well-being. They have to disclose if he has any sort of medical problems. So they've talked about his medical issues. He's talked about having a bit of an enlargement in his heart, which is likely due to HGH and steroids. And that's really kind of the kind of thing that I want to discuss first. A lot of people want to toggle around the idea of that perhaps it wasn't just viral pneumonia. Some people says, hey, look, the guy did a lot of steroids, he did a lot of HGH, And I would say, yes, that is absolutely true. He also took a certain medicine in April of 2021 that if you Google it, you will see that it causes fluid around the lungs, which of course also creates fluid around the heart. And several athletes have also suffered the same problem. So it's hard to tell which is going to be. I've never heard of steroids causing fluid in the lungs or around the heart. I've never heard of that. I've heard of the enlargements. I've seen numerous, what you would say, death certificates or medical examiners reports that will report a wrestler who has a history of HGH having enlarged organs, like the heart would be inflamed or something like that. I never heard anything about any fluid, but there's a certain medicine that when it was administered, and these reports came out later, that they caused all sorts of fluid around in the lungs and around the heart. Now, I'm not going to blame either one of those things, but I tell you that a lot of people have been having these conversations that, Triple H is retired and a lot of this is steroids and a lot of it is this and a lot of it is that. And as we read earlier, the tweet from WWE, some people are saying it's partly genetic. And I think it's probably a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B, a little bit of column C. And all these things put together can cause these issues. It's very difficult to say what one thing is going to cause the problem. But in any event, I don't think that it matters what caused it. I'm glad that it was caught and he cannot wrestle anymore. So we're sitting back, lamenting the wrestling career of Triple H. And some people have greatly increased their appreciation of Triple H over the last couple of years, especially since he got out of the ring and his politics no longer affect his on-screen character. That now he's not putting himself over, to protect his spot, and it's more or less he's in a position of helping elevate others. People more like and enjoy that Triple H, and that's what he's been doing most recently. And so that kind of leads to a lot of positive outpouring when he finally had to announce his retirement. But I did see something amongst all of this, the bat slapping for Triple H is Jonathan Snowden, the wrestling reporter. I'm not going to read his tweet exactly, but his report, what he tweeted out was that in recent years, WWE is pushing Undertaker and Triple H as being bigger stars than Steve Austin and The Rock, which I don't think they've ever done. I think it's obviously a cynical, ignorant, stupid wrestling reporter comment to make. I mean, if you can't understand that longevity, it accounts for something, and that Triple H, who started in WWE in 1994 or 1995 and was still wrestling there in 2019, would be known to a wider generation of people than somebody like The Rock, who stopped wrestling full time in 2003, maybe? I think The Rock had his last full-time match against Goldberg in 2003. And every time he's come back since, it's been in for short runs or one-offs. And Steve Austin hasn't wrestled a full match since 2003. So a whole generation of people have never seen Stone Cold Steve Austin wrestle. There is an entire generation of people who have never seen Stone Cold Steve Austin. They've never seen The Rock on a weekly basis. Yes, if you're 40 years old, you know that The Rock and Steve Austin at one point were the two biggest wrestling stars on the planet Earth. Yes, that is true. But it's not WWE propaganda. It is simply longevity. Somebody who's been around for a long time, like Undertaker, who was there from 1990, who went through the era of Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage, The Ultimate Warrior, wrestled all of those guys, wrestled Austin, wrestled Owen Hart, wrestled Eddie Guerrero, wrestled all of these guys who are now gone. Chris Benoit, wrestled Kurt Angle, wrestled Shawn Michaels, who all of these guys who had this longevity, 20-year careers, 30-year careers. Several generations of people have seen them. Obviously, it's going to be a larger outpouring, and it's going to be more people who have seen them and appreciate their work, even if it's not the best work they've ever done. Like, even if you remember Triple H from 2018, 2017, that's not the best stuff he's ever done. But for Christ's sake, you remember him. The kids now are looking at him as Triple H from NXT and Triple H from Evolution. Or not Triple H from Evolution, but Triple H from The Authority. And that's what they remember. You know, if you're in your 20s, you don't remember Triple H from the Attitude Era. You were a baby. You don't remember WrestleMania 16 when he won the main event. He was a baby. What do you know about that? You know, you have to go backwards in order to really, catch a vibe from that. And you really not going to get it from watching video. You can hear the crowd reactions, but you don't really get it. You don't really understand it. Your fundamental understanding of wrestling is probably going to be during the Reign of Terror, which a lot of people didn't really enjoy, which actually it helped me make the transition away from wrestling a little bit. Not because I didn't like Triple H, it's just because I just didn't like the Reign of Terror. I just thought it was awful. And then there was no real alternative to that. So, I wasn't really that much of a fan. And that's kind of what the legacy of Triple H is that he was around for so long. So many generations of people have seen him, and they all have their own version of Triple H. It's like, he's like, a Batman villain. People have said for years, Triple H isn't the guy. He's the guy that works with the guy. Well, guess what? The guy who works with the guy is part of the guy's gimmick. The guy can't get over without the guy who works with the guy. It's that simple. If you're the Rock and Roll Express, you need the Midnight Express. If you're Triple H, if you're the Rock, you need Triple H. You need that guy to exist in order to help you become a bigger and better star. You need that rival. You need that guy pushing you. Triple H can never be the top babyface in the company, and all the times they try to do that has been very, very odd, and it's never really worked. But he always works as the top rival in the company. This is why he was always great as a WrestleMania main event guy, who was the guy to drop the belt to someone else. And they did it so many times. And because it continues to work, and every time it worked, because he knew how to get heat. He knew how to help build his opponents. Even when he was in his most selfish time, and he was trying to make sure he got over, he still knew how to make his opponents look good. The legacy of Triple H, as I like to look at things from an archetypal standpoint, because I like the mythology of pro wrestling more than the reality-based era of pro wrestling, is when you look at Triple H and you start seeing him move towards the King of Kings and going into that element of his persona. There is this concept of the old king and then the young king. The young king is out to always prove himself. He's going to war to prove that he's tough, and that to gather more land, to spread the good word, and to prove that he can stretch out the kingdom, that he can bring more people in. But once you get older, you worry about maintaining what you have, and you begin to think about the future. And that's the archetype of that Triple H has followed throughout the entirety of his career. Is that when he was young, it was all about himself. When he finally started to really get over, he didn't want to go backwards. It took Triple H a long time to really get to the main event. It took him about 5 years, didn't it? 4 or 5 years to get to the main event. Why would you sacrifice yourself to go backwards? It just doesn't seem to make much sense. So he did what he had to do to maintain his position. And yeah, it was cutthroat. Yeah, it was in some ways brutal. And it was tough to live through. And I will say that he wasn't even the best at that point in time. I don't think he was that great, even though I do think he was quite good. But when he got older, you began to see that it was about helping others. And it began mostly with Evolution, and I think that's where it started, when he put over Randy, when he put over Batista. I know he beat Randy, but Randy wasn't exactly the let's say Randy made some mistakes, and Randy made it easy for him to get pushed out of the way, and then they had to redo it with Batista. And then, he helped build John Cena. He was instrumental in really getting over Dean Ambrose and Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns and all the guys in NXT. And it started out slowly with him helping a guy here and a guy there, while also trouncing the Codys and the Ted DiBiase's and those guys, really putting his foot up their asses. Yes, it started out slow. But the older he got, the more he put effort into helping others. And the more his career got on the downslide, the more he helped others. And that's a very important point. And it took him longer than maybe it should have. Some people think he probably should have started doing this in 2007. But ultimately, he did get to there. And I think he's done a tremendous job of righting some of the wrongs that he did have in the point of his career. And he lived long enough to do it, and he was active long enough to do it. And not to have his legacy be, oh, he's the guy who married Stephanie and married the boss's daughter and gets to be the star of the show and yada, yada, yada. That shouldn't be what his legacy is, even though we know that's how people are going to remember it. I have always decided to choose to remember Triple H as the Lex Luthor to The Rock's Superman. Specifically The Rock, not necessarily Steve Austin. They had some good matches together. I enjoyed their work together, but I always saw Triple H as more of a Rock villain, because when you think about all the really good stuff that built Triple H's character and the motivations for the character, even the promo that created the game, it all came when he was feuding with The Rock, and to me, it seems like he is specifically tailor-made as a Rock villain at a time when The Rock was the top babyface on planet Earth. And it was the right thing to do. And it was the right decision to make, where you had these two guys who came into the company around the same time. And they had feuded over the Intercontinental title. And they had feuded over the world title. It seemed like these guys were linked together. And of course, in later years, as they both kind of moved towards semi-retirement, it was teased that they would have more matches against each other. There was how many times did they tease Triple H and The Rock fighting at various WrestleManias? They sort of teased that it will actually occur again. So that's one of the things I always remember for Triple H. And another one that I always remember for Triple H is that he was, like Undertaker, like Shawn Michaels, a bridge through the various generations of WWE audiences. That's why I kind of think about it from time to time. You're going to have a generation of kids now who don't have an Undertaker, don't have a Triple H, don't have a Shawn Michaels, don't have that bridge from the past to the future. I guess that guy now is Randy Orton. It used to be Jeff Hardy when he was around. He was the guy who wrestled in a new generation era and was, still there. But now he's gone. So now Randy Orton is probably the oldest tenured guy, him and Edge. So maybe, they can carry the torch that Triple H started. But Triple H was the guy. If you were still into wrestling after Rock and Austin left, you knew who Triple H was. And you saw that, hey, Triple H has some momentum. He can be the guy who can help put over a John Cena to make a Batista or a Randy Orton or somebody like that. And then he could also help make Daniel Bryan and Seth Rollins, because he's still got all these years of investment into his character, into what he's done. He's got this legacy, this history that he can talk about, that he can build upon. And it was always great to have that, to have a sense of permanence, that you could see that these things aren't, as things changed, some things stayed the same. And as we enter an era of WWE right now, where it's going to be completely different. Again, you're talking about an era without some of the tentpole wrestlers. You're talking about an era, if you thought that things were really bad, a lot of the tentpoles are gone now. You know, there's people on Twitter looking and saying, hey, you're going into a WrestleMania with no Undertaker, no Triple H, no Shawn Michaels, no Hulk Hogan, no Ric Flair, no Savage, no Warrior. You know, this is in some ways uncharted territory for some people. And they're looking at guys like Brock Lesnar, who's been around for 20 years, and Randy Orton, who's been around for 20 years, and Edge, who's been around for over 20 years, and saying, okay, now these guys have to be the bridges for the next generation. Because there's people who've been watching wrestling since 1998. You know who Edge is. You've seen Brock Lesnar. And you're hoping that those guys can, maintain the audience and then bring in new people. And you got to give Triple H credit for being one of those guys who was able to stand there and perform at a high level for as long as he did. Whether he was a bigger star than Austin or The Rock is, to me, ridiculous. It's a silly question to even ask because we know it's not true. So what we're talking about is not who sold more merchandise or who sold more tickets. We're talking about longevity. And Triple H has a legacy that is far greater than The Rock's. While The Rock sold more tickets and The Rock sold more t-shirts and Steve Austin sold more tickets and more t-shirts and more gear, they didn't have the longevity. They didn't have, the ability to bridge across generations weekly. Like Steve Austin's going to come back for WrestleMania 38, and it's going to be big, and it's going to be awesome. But there's going to be a lot of kids in that audience who kind of going to be like, my dad is excited about Stone Cold Steve Austin. I just kind of know the guy. I know him because my dad talked about him a lot. If you're 11 years old, what do you know about Stone Cold Steve Austin? He's the old guy who hosts the show you don't watch on the Peacock Network. It's kind of like when I was a kid, I used to see Harley Race hanging around with Vader. I was like, all right, who's this old guy? You have to think about things in that way. Triple H was still actively wrestling just 2 years ago. So you have to understand that some people are definitely looking at Triple H and saying, man, he's a bigger part of my childhood than The Rock. Because for a lot of people, he was. Because he was there. Whether he was in the suit as the authority or the motorcycle jacket, he was there. And that's really what people are looking at. And that's what I truly believe that Triple H's legacy is that he's the bridge, the glue through various generations. And, hopefully these other guys can really carry the torch. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Like, share, and subscribe. And I'll talk to you guys later.
Old non-aggression. Once that lesson sets in, you'll see a session where you got an affection for no progression, regression.